Chosen one, listen closely. What you worried about late at night? What felt unfair, delayed, or unresolved? God is saying one clear thing today. It's already handled. You didn't see it happen, you didn't hear the shift, but justice moved in silence. The situation that tried to break you has already been judged in the spiritual realm. That's why things suddenly feel lighter, calmer, different. This message didn't find you by accident. If you're here right now, it means God stepped in where you couldn't, spoke where you stayed silent, and fought a battle you were never meant to fight alone. Stay with this message, because what you're about to hear will explain why justice was served and why your season is changing now. Before you get lost in this video, you must first do 3 things to connect with God's energy. First, you must like the video and then leave a comment, "Thank you, God, for choosing me." And finally, you must send your signal to the universe by subscribing to the channel. God stepped in when you couldn't anymore. There comes a point in life where you reach the edge of your strength, not because you are weak, but because you have been strong for too long. You kept going when your heart was tired, you kept smiling when your spirit felt heavy, and you kept hoping even when nothing around you seemed to change. You tried every human way possible. You explained yourself again and again. You tried to prove your truth. You defended your intentions, and you waited for understanding. But instead of relief, you were met with silence, resistance, or misunderstanding. That stage of exhaustion was not failure. It was a signal. It was the moment when God gently said, "You've done enough. Now, let me take over." God steps in, not when we are loud and fighting, but when we finally surrender and admit that we can't carry it anymore. When you stopped arguing, stopped chasing validation, and stopped forcing outcomes, heaven began moving quietly on your behalf. Justice did not arrive with noise or instant applause. It arrived in silence, in stillness, and in ways you couldn't see at first. God saw the tears you cried alone at night, the prayers you whispered when your voice felt too weak to speak out loud, and the moments you questioned yourself because others made you doubt your worth. Even when people misunderstood you or turned away, God never looked away. What you thought was a delay was actually protection. What felt like being stuck was actually divine timing, aligning things in your favor. God was closing doors you couldn't see, redirecting paths you didn't know were dangerous, and preparing outcomes that no human influence could interfere with. You didn't lose because God was absent. You paused because God was rearranging things behind the scenes. Sometimes God allows silence so that his work remains untouched by ego, opinions, and outside interference. If things had moved when you wanted, the result might have been incomplete or unfair. But God's justice is thorough. It considers every detail, every intention, and every unseen factor. That is why it takes time. And that is why, when it finally happens, it brings peace instead of chaos. This phase of exhaustion was not meant to break you. It was meant to shift responsibility from your shoulders to God's hands. You were never meant to fight every battle yourself. When you reached the point where you could no longer control the outcome, that's when the outcome became divine. God stepped in not to punish you, but to protect you, restore balance, and bring a resolution that honors your heart and preserves your integrity. What's coming, or what has already quietly happened, is not random. It's the result of God stepping in at the exact moment you couldn't anymore. The truth was seen, even if it was never spoken. There is a deep kind of frustration that comes when you know the truth, but the world chooses to believe something else. You did not lie, yet lies about you were accepted. You had pure intentions, yet they were questioned. You stayed honest, yet your name was pulled into doubt. That pain is heavy because it makes you feel unseen and unheard. You may have replayed conversations in your mind, wishing you had said more or explained better. But here is the peace-giving truth you need to hear. God never needed your explanation. While people rely on words, proofs, and appearances, God sees straight into the heart. He understands what was meant, not just what was said. Nothing about you was hidden from Him. Justice did not come because you defended yourself perfectly. It came because God already knew the full story. He saw what happened behind closed doors, what was said when you were not present, and what was done in secret. Every hidden motive, every quiet manipulation, and every false narrative was visible to Him. Even when the truth felt buried under noise, God never lost sight of it. That is why you were asked to stay calm and not react the way others expected. Your restraint was not weakness, it was trust, and that trust allowed God to move without interference. You may notice now that people are behaving differently around you. Some are quieter, some avoid eye contact, some suddenly act kind, unsure, or distant. Situations that once felt tense now feel strangely still. That is not coincidence. That quiet is the sound of truth settling in. You don't always witness the moment justice is served, but you feel its aftermath. When God exposes truth, He doesn't always announce it publicly. Sometimes He lets realization sink in privately, where pride has no place to hide. What matters most is not public validation, but spiritual acknowledgement. The truth about you has already been recognized where it counts the most. God has cleared your name in the unseen realm, and when that happens, visible reality begins to adjust. You may never receive an apology. You may never hear someone admit they were wrong, but you will notice that the weight has lifted, the tension has eased, and your spirit feels lighter. That is God saying, I saw everything, and I handled it. You were never meant to fight lies with louder words. You were meant to stand still and let truth rise on its own. And it has. The truth was seen, even when it was never spoken. And now that it has been acknowledged by God Himself, nothing false can hold power over you anymore. What hurt you could not destroy you. There are experiences in life that cut so deep, you wonder how you're still standing. What hurt you was real. It wasn't imagined, exaggerated, or small. It reached places inside you that only you and God know about. At times, it felt like that pain would finally end your hope, your softness, or your ability to trust. Yet here you are, still breathing, still believing, still moving forward. That alone is proof that what was meant to destroy you failed. The situation didn't break you. It reshaped you. The pressure didn't crush you. It strengthened parts of you that never would have grown otherwise. God did not allow the test to punish you or make you suffer needlessly. He allowed it to reveal something powerful within you, your endurance. You kept going even when there was no applause, no encouragement, and no guarantee that things would get better. You learned how to stand on your own faith when nothing around you made sense. That endurance became your shield. Many people would have turned bitter, angry, or cruel after going through what you faced, but you didn't, and that choice mattered more than you realize. Justice was served the moment you refused to let pain turn you into someone you are not. You didn't let hatred replace your heart. You didn't let revenge control your actions. You didn't allow darkness to steal your compassion. Choosing faith over revenge was not easy. It was a daily decision. Some days, you had to remind yourself to breathe instead of react, to pray instead of lash out, to trust instead of doubt. That inner battle was harder than the outer one, and you won it quietly. Surviving what should have crushed you sent a signal into the spiritual realm. It showed that your spirit was anchored in something greater than circumstances. God noticed your restraint, your patience, and your willingness to keep your soul clean, even when you were wronged. That survival itself activated divine justice, not because you demanded it, but because your response proved your character. God defends those who choose growth over grudges and healing over hostility. God does not always remove the fire from a chosen one's path. Instead, He allows the fire to reveal that it has no power over them. The flames came close, but they did not consume you. The heat was intense, but it did not erase who you are. Now, when you look back, you can see that you are stronger, wiser, and more grounded than before. What hurt you did not destroy you. It refined you. And that refinement is the very reason justice moved in your favor. Silence was your protection, not your weakness. There were many moments when staying silent felt harder than speaking up. You had the words. You had the truth. You had every reason to explain yourself or defend your side. Yet something within you held you back, almost as if God was gently saying, "Be still." At times, that silence made you question yourself. You wondered if people saw it as weakness, fear, or acceptance. But silence was never about giving up. It was about trusting that not every battle needs your voice. Some need God's hand instead. Silence was strategy, not submission. While others were busy talking, explaining, arguing, or trying to control the narrative, God was working quietly where human words could not reach. You didn't need to attend every discussion or correct every misunderstanding because God was already present in those spaces. Decisions were being shaped, hearts were being stirred, and truth was being revealed without you having to force anything. What looked like inaction was actually divine movement happening beyond your sight. There were conversations you were never invited to, moments you never witnessed, and choices made without your input. And that was by design. God often removes chosen ones from the room so He can work without interference. If you had been present, emotions might have taken over, or pride might have complicated the outcome. But your absence allowed God to speak clearly. Justice was served in quiet places, in private realizations, and in unseen shifts that didn't require your participation. Your silence confused people. Some expected a reaction. Some waited for you to defend yourself. Some assumed your quiet meant defeat. But what they didn't understand was that your silence was rooted in faith. You trusted that God saw everything and that His timing would be more accurate than your response. That kind of trust is powerful. It tells God, "I don't need to fight for myself. I believe you will." Silence also protected your spirit. By not engaging in unnecessary conflict, you saved yourself from regret, bitterness, and words you couldn't take back. You protected your peace while God protected your future. Staying quiet kept your heart clean and your intentions pure. And that purity matters deeply to God. God always defends those who trust Him enough to be still. He honors restraint more than reaction and faith more than force. Now, as things begin to shift and the truth settles, you can see that your silence did not delay justice. It allowed it. What you held back in words, God released in power. And that is why silence was never your weakness. It was your shield. The shift you feel is proof that it's done. There is a quiet change that happens inside you when something is truly over, and it doesn't come with noise or drama. One day you simply wake up and notice that your chest feels lighter. Your thoughts aren't racing the way they used to. The anxiety that once followed you everywhere suddenly loosens its grip. You may even catch yourself saying, "I don't care anymore," and then pause, wondering when that happened. This is not emotional numbness, and it is not you giving up. This is closure. This is what it feels like when God finishes a chapter on your behalf. When God serves justice, He doesn't just correct the situation around you. He heals the weight inside you. For a long time, your spirit carried questions, confusion, and emotional pressure that words couldn't describe. You replayed moments, conversations, and scenarios, hoping for clarity or resolution. Now, without explanation, that inner noise has gone quiet. That silence inside your heart is proof that something has been settled. You didn't imagine this shift. It didn't come from distraction or denial. It came because the battle is no longer active. Something truly ended, not just externally, but internally. The situation no longer has power over your emotions. The memory may still exist, but it doesn't control your reactions anymore. You no longer feel the urge to explain yourself, defend your past, or seek understanding from people who never tried to understand you. That is not indifference. It is freedom. God closed the door in a way that allowed you to walk away without dragging pain behind you. This is why the things that once triggered you no longer do. Words that once hurt now pass by without leaving a mark. Situations that once made your heart race now feel distant and irrelevant. That emotional release is not accidental. It is God removing the residue of the struggle from your spirit. When God resolves something, He doesn't leave you half-healed. He brings completion. You may not have seen the moment justice was served. You may not have heard the final conversation or witnessed the turning point, but you feel the result, and that is enough. Peace is the confirmation. Calm is the evidence. The lack of emotional reaction is the sign that the chapter has closed. God doesn't always announce endings. Sometimes He simply changes how they affect you. And now that the shift has happened, you are free to move forward without looking back. The weight is gone. The chapter is closed. And your spirit knows. It's done. Justice was served without you losing your soul. One of the greatest victories you can ever experience is winning without losing yourself. And that is exactly what happened here. You came out on the other side without becoming bitter, cruel, or hardened by what you went through. You could have chosen shortcuts. You could have responded with the same energy that hurt you. You could have compromised your values just to feel justified. But you didn't. And that matters more than any public outcome. You stayed true to who you are, even when it would have been easier to change. That alone shows that this was not just a human victory. It was a spiritual one. You didn't betray your heart to protect your ego. You didn't silence your conscience just to feel right. You didn't lower your standards to match someone else's behavior. There were moments when it would have been tempting to say things you didn't mean or do things you'd later regret, but you chose restraint. You chose self-respect. You chose peace over proving a point. That choice protected your soul while God handled the rest. God stepped in and resolved the situation in a way that kept your hands clean. You didn't have to manipulate the outcome. You didn't have to expose anyone. You didn't have to fight dirty. God handled it with fairness and precision, making sure that the truth stood on its own. That is divine justice. Justice that doesn't require you to sacrifice your character to achieve it. The outcome wasn't rushed, and it wasn't forced. It unfolded in a way that allowed everyone involved to face the truth without you being dragged into chaos. What makes this victory even more meaningful is the lesson it carried. You learned that your integrity is not a weakness, it is your protection. By staying aligned with your values, you kept your spirit light and your conscience clear. You can move forward without shame, without regret, and without looking over your shoulder. There is peace in knowing that you didn't win at the cost of your soul. Divine justice always leaves you whole. It corrects the situation while preserving your inner world. You didn't lose yourself in anger, revenge, or bitterness. Instead, you grew in wisdom, strength, and emotional maturity. That growth is part of the reward. Now, as you step into what's next, you do so with confidence and clarity. You didn't just survive, you stayed true. And that is the kind of justice that doesn't fade with time. It stays with you, reminding you that you can overcome anything without losing who you are. This was never about punishment. It was about balance. It's easy to think that justice means punishment, especially when you've been hurt or treated unfairly. But God's justice works very differently from human anger. God does not act out of rage or emotion. He moves with wisdom, timing, and order. What happened was never about hurting someone else. It was about restoring balance where things had gone out of alignment. When something in your life felt unfair, blocked, or heavy for too long, it wasn't because God was ignoring you. It was because a correction was needed so that everything could return to its proper place. Justice was served in a way that allowed growth instead of destruction. God doesn't tear things down just to prove a point. He corrects paths so lessons can be learned and cycles can end. What was taken from you, your peace, your time, your trust, or your energy, was not lost forever. It was temporarily removed so that it could return in a healthier and more meaningful form. God never gives back the same thing that hurt you. He gives back something wiser, stronger, and better suited for who you have become. What felt delayed in your life was not denied. The waiting season was preparing you for a version of the blessing that would actually last. If things had arrived earlier, they might not have fit the person you are now. God's timing ensures that when something comes back around, it arrives with purpose, clarity, and stability. That delay protected you from receiving something before you were ready to hold it properly. This correction was about alignment, aligning your heart, your environment, and your direction with what supports your growth. Some situations had to shift so peace could return. Some connections had to change so balance could be restored. That does not mean anyone was destroyed or condemned. It simply means things were adjusted so harmony could continue. This wasn't revenge. Revenge leaves people empty and creates new wounds. Realignment brings closure and calm. It allows you to move forward without carrying resentment. You don't feel the need to see anyone suffer because your spirit is no longer disturbed. That peace is the sign that balance has been restored. God's justice doesn't leave chaos behind. It leaves clarity. You now stand in a place where lessons have been learned, emotions have settled, and the path ahead feels lighter. What was corrected was never meant to hurt. It was meant to heal. And now that balance has been restored, your life can continue forward with peace, stability, and renewed alignment. Your new season begins because the old one is settled. A new season does not begin with noise or announcements. It begins with closure. And now that justice has been completed, something deep inside you has been released. You are no longer tied to what hurt you, disappointed you, or drained you. That invisible weight you carried for so long, emotional debt, is gone. You no longer owe the past your energy, your thoughts, or your peace. God has already handled what you could not fix, and because of that, you are finally free to move forward without dragging old pain into new places. You don't have to look back anymore, not to check if someone understands you, not to see if someone regrets what they did, and not to replay moments that once haunted you. The chapter has been closed with divine finality. Waiting for apologies is no longer necessary because healing did not come through words. It came through release. God gave you closure without requiring anyone else's cooperation. That is real freedom. This is why your energy feels different now. You may notice fresh motivation, unexpected ideas, or a quiet excitement about what's ahead. New doors are opening not because you chase them, but because you are finally ready to walk through them without fear. Opportunities that once felt blocked are appearing naturally. People who align with your growth are finding their way into your life. This shift is not forced, it's flowing. That flow is the sign that your season has changed. The past no longer has authority over your future. Old labels, old wounds, and old limitations cannot follow you into this new chapter. What once defined you no longer controls you. You are stepping forward with clarity instead of confusion, with confidence instead of doubt. The lessons remain, but the pain does not. God removed what would have slowed you down before allowing you to rise. Elevation begins when you are light enough to rise. And now, without resentment, bitterness, or unresolved hurt weighing you down, you are ready. This new season is not about survival. It's about expansion. It's about stepping into spaces that match who you've become, not who you used to be. Justice was served quietly, but its result is powerful. The old season is settled. The path ahead is open. And now, with peace in your spirit and faith in your steps, your elevation truly begins.